Hey you and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this whole video we're gonna take, that trip. That trip you've all been waiting for. And when I say you all, I mean probably just one guy. We're going to Jersey. Jersey Shore, baby. I think that's something we all collectively wished we could, erase. This is a very weird and twisting story, and it's about a local radio host named April Kauffman. April was married to Dr. James Kauffman, a prominent New Jersey endocrinologist. They had a great marriage, were well paired, but it turned out Dr. James was kind of a, Dr. Jekyll. This would be news to April. Let's give it a go, you and I. Come on. April was born and raised in the state of New Jersey, a lifelong shore resident. She had a strong love of motorcycles, Corvettes, and for her an even bigger passion was advocating for US veterans. She would be involved in countless programs helping former soldiers. April herself was a bit of an owl entrepreneur. She had various ventures, she owned a salon, she owned a catering business, but she would go on to eventually become a talk show radio host for WIBG-FN, weekdays between 2 and 4. Don't miss it. Pretty good slot there now. You know yourself. She had a strong, gregarious personality, was well liked by her audience, where April would talk about anything and everything.
If you don't vote, I will find out I'm going to your house, I'm dragging you outside. Love being here to bring you the truth. As unvarnished, as unpretty, unbuttered on the biscuit it is. Homelessness is a big issue in our country right now for our veterans.
As much as I talk, I want to be interviewed because I really want to tell you people. When I did this initiative and King Arthur and I started to tackle this situation with the lack of veterans health care, I'm really going to tell you who helped me, who gave me lip service, the people that really told me it would never be done, told me it would never be done.
April lived in Linwood, New Jersey, with her husband since 2003, Dr. James Kauffman, a fairly prominent guy in his own right. She had a daughter, Kim, from a previous marriage, and 2 grandsons. Now, Dr. James, he was a real tough guy. A former Green Beret, medals galore, Purple Heart, sharpshooting medals, a Viet fucking Nam vet. He had been ambushed by the Vietnamese, stabbed, his whole unit wiped out, but he managed to crawl his way back to safety. Platoon? We've seen it. He lived it. 2 tours, so watch yourself. As you can imagine, this was a good fit for April, who was out there demanding quality healthcare for those who served.
This was such a big issue that affected our veterans and our state, our country. So I will thank my husband for a lot of the things that I've learned over the years.
So, April and James, they were two large figures in the local community, and they were happy out, it seemed. Every morning he'd be at the door to his medical practice before April herself would be following soon after. Thursday, 10th of May 2012 was no different until it was. At 8:30 a.m., Dr. James called his wife from his practice in Egg Harbor Township, as he usually did in the mornings. This time, he got no answer, and after trying, her for a few times, he eventually called the handyman to go, just have a go. And the handyman found what he found.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I have my boss is down. She's got a cut on her arm.
47-year-old April was found dead on the floor of her bedroom, face down, having been shot multiple times. The medical examiner would speculate she had been shot in bed and struggled out before collapsing on the floor. This would soon become a media frenzy, a very popular local radio host gunned down in her own bed.
Can you tell us about it? You're obviously very upset.
I'm very upset. She's a dear friend of mine. I can't believe that. I can't believe it. We just talked last night.
the investigation began, the funeral would be held.
Popular South Jersey radio personality April Kauffman will be laid to rest. The 47-year-old was found shot to death Thursday morning inside her Linwood, New Jersey home. Our Katie Zachary is live in Margate at Beth El Synagogue, where the funeral service has just begun. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, Lori. That's right. A private funeral service for April Kauffman is getting underway as we speak inside the synagogue behind me. Outside, you see several veterans. They have been lining the entrance to the synagogue for the last hour, holding flags. And also, there are 24 motorcycles lined up in front of the synagogues. After the funeral, which we're told will be about an hour, veterans will get on their motorcycle and lead a procession once this service ends. Sources tell NBC 10 that investigators do not believe her murder is random.
And so, whispering began, as it would, about who would have done this, rumor mill, straight up cranked into action. She was liked by everybody, so, what you got, an affair? Seems like there may have been indiscretions on both sides of James and April's marriage. That would be quite a common thing to happen, as we've seen many times, love, that's a motherfucker. Love triangles that we talk about usually end in a shitstorm, but it didn't seem like this was one of those. But was April afraid that something like this was going to happen to her? Her last radio appearance seemed to suggest it at a certain point.
My legacy of leaving, a really beautiful daughter and 2 grandchildren on this planet, I really hope to God that people, hey, I could get a flyover at my funeral now, but could really say that here was an American citizen who really stood up and dug her heels in and yelled fire, and I expected it to be put out.
Well, the rumor mill was, going 90. April's daughter, Kim Pack, her daughter from a previous marriage, pretty much from Jump Street, she was, had her eye on the ball and her finger pointed. She was pointing it right at her stepfather, Dr. James Kauffman. Now, they never really got along. I mean, here's Kim's wedding day. That relationship was dripping with as much love as this sentence is sarcasm. It seemed that this big shot doctor, he was very controlling of his wife, April, who was, was a strong person in her own right, yet he had her to a T. 2 months before her untimely death, April confided in her daughter, Kim Pack, that, hey, stick a fork in it, this marriage, it's done. A few days after the murder, James hired a big shot defense attorney. He wasn't named a suspect, so doing that was suspect. Now, though, at the time of April's death, he did have a great alibi. He was caught on footage buying a little old snack at the time his wife was shot in Wawa. Kim was on the case as the months went by, trying to get something, out of this investigation that seemed to be going nowhere. James had stopped talking long ago. It seemed like he was moving on, and the county prosecutor was basically of the line that it's a continuing investigation, it's open. What more do you want from me? For such a high-profile case, it seemed the investigators were dragging their feet, while the public were more keen on getting answers than the people who were, well, supposed to. It's never really been explained why such a major case was kind of kicked to the curb.
It was 1 year ago today when Linwood, New Jersey was shocked to hear that April Kauffman had been murdered. Well, tonight the crime remains unsolved.
While there was a candlelit vigil on the 1-year anniversary of April Kauffman's death, James was off auctioning all her stuff. A few months later, he remarried, this time to his high school sweetheart. Now, what really lit the powder keg in, what happened to April was when James went after her life insurance policy. Classic. See, he had tried to get it 3 months after her death, and the insurance crowd were kind of hesitant. So in June 2013, he basically filed suit demanding her death money. So, with James still not a suspect, and with Kim believing him to be that guy, she filed a wrongful death suit against James.
This morning, through my attorneys, I have filed paperwork in federal court to stop Dr. Kauffman from obtaining the money.
This would prevent him from getting the $600,000 life insurance policy. See, there is the old Slayer statute. No money until the insurance company could be assured that James wasn't the killer. James Kauffman would give a deposition on the wrongful death suit. Categorically, of course, denying, of course, that he had any part in his beloved wife April's death.
And she had a pallor, which I've known after 30 years is obviously someone has passed away. And I ran downstairs and went out on the lawn and was hysterical and started vomiting.
Okay, do you have tissues, by the way?
I got them.
Do you need to break?
Not to do with me. Don't know what you're on about. Now, during that 4-hour deposition, something came out.
Have you ever served in any branch of the military?
No.
Did you ever tell Kim Pack you were in the military?
Yes.
Okay. Did she ever do a project for college, and part of the project was you being in the military?
Yes.
And what you went through?
Yes.
And that you carried bodies?
Yes.
And the torture that you had gone through?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anyone that you were a Green Beret?
Yes.
Who'd you tell?
I don't recall how many people.
He never served in the old military. He was full of shit. Stolen valor, I believe it's called. Big no-no. And he gave some theories on what he believed really happened to April and who was responsible.
Who do you think did it?
I thought it could be someone who was one of the veterans. The last choice was that it was someone in a motorcycle gang.
What motorcycle gang?
The Pagans.
Ooh, Pagans, you say? The Pagans Motorcycle Club was founded in 1959 and are an outlaw motorcycle gang. Seems like they're a rival to Hell's Angels and involved in various criminal enterprises on the East Coast. Pretty hardcore 1%ers. But that, as they say, was that. At that time, no decision would be made on the civil suit. None would be made for another good few years. And the boardwalk remained. In 2017, a new county prosecutor, Damon Tyner, would take office. He asked his staff to compile a list of unsolved homicide cases going back 40 years in Atlantic County. He wanted the ones that were solvable. April Kauffman was pretty high up on the list. They would re-examine the case of what happened to this beloved local radio host. Certain breaks had been made, James's deposition included, and possibly a renewed investigation could get to the bottom of what happened. James Kauffman was worth another look, and when a tip, a tippity tip, came in from the FBI about James, but relating to a completely different matter, he was looking more and more suspicious. See, investigators got a tip that maybe, just maybe, he was involved in some kind of scheme running out of his medical office, narcotics scheme. And so the police popped by. They were going to go through his papers and, snoop around. Well, when the police showed up, this happened.
Here he comes. He just went the other way. He just went down the side hallway. He might have been on the phone, I think.
Yeah, it looked like he was on the phone and wandered down.
He went down the side hallway.
Yeah.
Hold on, he's coming out. He's coming out. District 5, we got one at gunpoint. We have one at gunpoint, Dr. James Kauffman.
Put the gun down.
We have a 5'11". I have one at gunpoint, Dr. James Kauffman. He has a weapon.
We only have a search warrant. We have a search warrant. You're not under arrest.
Still have to under order. Okay? We're going to be least intrusive as possible. You have any questions for me?
No, I just didn't appreciate being handcuffed, that's all.
I told them you don't want to get handcuffed, you have shoulder issues,
right.
You have no weapons on you. Where's the weapon in the residence?
I told him.
Yeah, I already told the SWAT guys.
And is there anyone else in there?
No.
Everyone come back at PD1.
Only one weapon in there?
Yeah. This is a legal weapon.
Yeah, that's no problem. I don't worry about that. Just wanted to make sure that it ends peacefully today. But thank you for answering my calls. Thank you for talking.
Sources and bodies that we can bring down to help go through stuff. Okay.
Well, I just saw something about the lab.
Right. There's a part of what we're looking at is allegations of medical fraud. Okay. So that's fine. But here's I had one or two questions because we want to go through here and keep things orderly.
He was arrested on weapons charges, and this gave prosecutors time to get into what really happened to April. And a cooperating witness informed the police that James had been asking around about what's the best way to make someone go away the permanent way. The witness being a former pagan biker guy. It seems that Dr. James led a double life, when by night he would write fraudulent opioid prescriptions for the pagan biker gang. He was part of a drug ring. They'd pop into his office, pick up the prescriptions, and sell them on the street. So this little drug ring, not that little, was one maybe April learned of. Maybe she also learned that James was never no Green Beret. And she wanted a divorce, and she threatened to expose what he really was and what he was doing, which, well, that was a year before she was killed in 2011. Over the next 12 months, a hitman would be sought and eventually found.
Lucy, investigators broke this case wide open today in what sounded like a made-for-TV movie involving drugs, greed, the Pagans motorcycle gang, and a murder-for-hire plot by a doctor who was afraid of losing everything in a divorce.
Now, that wasn't the only fraud Dr. James was involved in. You know, when he told the Hippocratic Oath to go fuck itself in return for some sweet kibosh stuff. After all, 70,000 people die every year in the US alone of drug overdoses, 2/3 of them being from opioids, so he was a drug dealer with a degree. He had been linked to an insurance fraud scheme, one involving unnecessary blood tests where he would get a kickback from the blood test lab, another involving compound cream prescriptions for pain management. Gotta love when you're highly advised to take a very addictive substance for pain. Do you have it though? James Kauffman paid a biker 10 grand to do the job, and on the 10th of May 2012, as he was leaving the house that morning, as he was out the door, he left the doors unlocked. Shortly after he left the convenience store, he apparently handed the hitman a gun and pointed him in the direction of his home. Funnily enough, right, the killer, the hitman, James didn't pull the trigger, but he was responsible for a death. See, the hitman, a Francis Mulholland, died a year and a half after April's death. He died of a drug overdose, surprisingly enough, one prescribed by Dr. James Kauffman. It seems that Francis Mulholland, he never got over doing what he did. And so, for 5 years after April's death, the drug ring continued, now that a loose end had been taken out of the picture.
Today, James Kauffman, age 69, and Ferdinand Augello, age 62, were charged with murder in connection with the death of April Kauffman, in addition to racketeering related to the illegal distribution of narcotics through Kauffman's former medical practice. Additionally, Augello is charged with conspiracy to commit the murder of James M. Kauffman. Upon information and belief known to my office, an individual named Francis Frank Mulholland was paid a sum of money to kill April Kauffman.
In January 2018, James Kauffman was charged with, well, putting a hit on his wife and racketeering, working with the Pagan motorcycle gang to set up an illegal drug distribution network for OxyContin. He was accused of working with the apparent leader of the Pagans, a fella named Ferdinand Augello, to do, well, what happened? He too would be arrested and a number of other indicted in this drug ring. Now, of course, James would deny that he had ordered any kind of, solicited any kind of murder, which then Ferdinand Augello organized and Francis Mulholland carried out. He would deny he had anything to do with it. He would say that he was strong-armed into this drug ring, and that April was killed when James said he wanted out, which explains his behavior following her death. That, to the majority, unsurprisingly, seemed unbelievable. Though he did have his supporters. As his links with the Pagan motorcycle gang were being exposed, prosecutors began to worry that he could be assaulted or worse while being held. Threats were made.
We learned Dr. James Kauffman has been moved to a prison in Hudson County, New Jersey, due to an alleged plot by a co-defendant to have him killed.
And so, they moved him to another facility for his protection.
Well, tonight, an investigation is underway into the death of Dr. James Kauffman. The man charged with arranging his wife's murder took his own life in his jail cell, and he left a suicide note.
Before he could go on trial in January 2018, 68-year-old James Kauffman was found dead. He had used a bedsheet. Beside him was a 6-page note. In it, he denied doing anything to his wife. He said it was April herself who introduced him to the Pagan motorcycle gang. Remember, she loved bikes and all that stuff. And she was the one responsible for setting up the narcotics ring with the Pagans, but honestly, this isn't widely believed to be true. From James Kauffman's final note. Quote, "As God as my witness and will be, I cannot live like this. No matter what anybody says, I did not do anything to my wife, and I was not in the rackets. Morituri te salutamus." I'm sure I butchered that, but it's, it's Latin for we who are about to die. Salute you. Said, by, people, criminals and captives during a mock naval battle. They were probably not going to make it out alive, so they said that to the Emperor, and they also said it in Gladiator. So maybe he was a Russell Crowe fan.
We who are about to die, salute you!
Sometime in 2011, April came to me and said, would I like to go to a motorcycle rally at Smithville to meet some of her friends. When we got there, they were sitting on an outside patio next to the bar. I was slightly shocked, to say the least, that they had the colours of pagans. I was very nervous. One of the leaders said for me to see his motorcycle. When we got there, he said April said I would help them out. And after that, he explains more or less how he was forced into being the, top of this drug ring. I want to apologize to any person I've hurt, insulted, or was rude to in my 68 plus years. I made peace with God and said the Shema. I'm ready to go. Goodbye. P.S. Sorry about my handwriting, and thanks to my friends who stood by me. They knew I didn't kill April. His co-conspirator, Ferdinand Augello, was ultimately convicted in the murder of April Kauffman, but denies he had anything to do with it. In 2018, he was sentenced to life in prison. And so ends this old one. One we'll probably never really get to the bottom of, about what was really going on there. But it's really a story about greed, how we can have it all and still not enough, which, in turn, when you get into what we got into, will invariably lead to tragedy all around, all a ring. Like a drugs ring, narcotics ring, bringing it back. Thank you, so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you. I will see you as always real soon in the next video, Tuesdays and Fridays. Take care of yourselves. Mike out.